We've all had the experience of not fitting in some way or another. Maybe we weren't the popular kids or the sporty kids or the fashionable kids or whatever. But what if it went a lot deeper than that? What if what you didn't fit with was you? With the sex you were born with the name that your family gave you. For thousands of Virginia students, and about 1.6 million Americans over the age of 15, that's a fact of their lives. One of those is my child. They're non-binary, and they came out to us early in high school. I knew they had something on their mind. You can tell when your kid has something on their mind. So I said, let's take a walk. They wanted to talk, and they were struggling to get the words out, but they eventually told me. And I reassured them we love them, period, and we support them, period. They were relieved, but they weren't surprised, because they knew they were safe with us. Far too many children are not safe at home. Over 1.3 million children were victims of abuse or neglect nationwide in 2019, and in 78% of cases, the parents were the abusers. As horrible as that is, and it is horrible, transgender youth are nearly twice as likely to suffer psychological abuse as their cisgender peers. And there's more. In 2019, 6% of heterosexual high school students surveyed reported attempting suicide in the previous year. That's terrifying. For lesbian, gay, or bisexual high school students, that 6% turns to 24%. And while all that is horrible, for transgender youth, 56% surveyed have attempted suicide at least once. Far too many children are abused by those who should care for them. Suicide and self-harm already take far too many of our youth. And both of these are horrible. Both of them are worse for transgender youth. The draft policies will harm children you have a duty to protect. More students will feel they have no place they belong. More students will be abused or neglected by those who should care for them. And more students will harm themselves or worse. These are actual real harms to actual real people.
Children seek approval from their teachers, other adults in their lives, and their peers. Teenagers seek to shock those around them, but also desperately need and want boundaries. You would be blind not to see that the social contagion of transgenderism, as opposed to the true gender dysphoria, which is very real and also very rare, is more prevalent among white, middle, and upper middle class youth. And their parents are also eager to affirm, because if they have a trans child, then they automatically become parents of the marginalized. They and their children now cannot be called oppressors. Never mind the irreversible effects of puberty blockers, cross-gender hormones, and that is without even touching on the body-mutilating surgeries being performed on minors who do not have the cognitive ability to consent. And that brings me to my almost last point. As long as minors cannot get Tylenol or Advil at school without parental consent, they cannot be allowed to transition their gender without informed parental consent. And even when they do get that consent, they do not get to infringe of their rights to privacy of other students.
I have an investment in this issue as a professional, but also as a trans person. Trans is within the spectrum of human diversity. Trans is beautiful, it's normal, and I knew my trans beauty at the age of 5. Yet people don't talk about trans joy. We talk about high rates of suicide, poor health outcomes, poverty, violence, death. I'm here to remind you, dysphoria is not disorder. It is the result of living in a world that is trying to crush your spirit. I had no chance for health or happiness because my whole world told me that being trans is detestable and pathological. 5 years old and already marked as other. This is the kind of other that places children at risk for sexual violence, depression, homelessness, and suicide. This policy asks professionals and educators to deny an already vulnerable group their basic dignity. We are talking about basic dignity. A childhood without basic dignity is living in a perpetually altered and unsafe reality. To be told, we care about you, and we deny yourself. That's a dangerous message. It was a reality that as a child, I hope I could someday escape. I fantasized about death every day of my adolescence, because at that age, that was the only choice I could imagine for myself. At 22, I was hospitalized for attempting to end my life. This is why I work in mental health. It took 10 years of building my family outside of my family to heal. and find joy and arrive at a place where most days I feel life is worth living. Had there been an affirming adult in my life, I could have had stability and safety. I would have had a different story. We don't need to go backwards. We don't need to do this to children. I oppose this policy because following this proposed policy will lead to suffering, attempts at suicide, death, homelessness, violence. I'm not speaking in hypotheticals. I'm standing in front of you. This is real. You will be hurting real people.